It's my pleasure. I mean, they are like part of my family. I have the pleasure of introducing Mary Kalantzis and Bill Cope. Mary Kalantzis from the College of Education, both the University of Illinois and Urbana-Champaign in Illinois in the States. And well, she was Dean of the College of Education at the University of Illinois from 2006 to 2016. Before this, she was Dean of the Faculty of Education, Language and Community Services at the RMIT University in Melbourne, in Australia, and President of the Australian Council of Deans of Education. With Bill Cope, she has co-authored and co-edited many books and papers at Cambridge University Press, with us in Common Ground, and for example, these of new learning elements of science of education, and many others. And Bill Cope is a professor in the Department of Education Policy, Organization, and Leadership at the University of Illinois. And he and Mary are directors of Common Ground Research Networks, not-for-profit organization on developing and applying new publishing technologies. His research interests include theories and practices of pedagogy, cultural and linguistic diversity, and new technologies of representation and communication. His and Mary Kalantzis' recent research has focused on the development of digital writing and assessment technologies, with the support of a number of major grants from the US Department of Education, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the National Science Foundation. The result has been Scholar, a multi-modal writing and assessment environment. So it's for me a pleasure to introduce you. Okay, I will go and see it there with the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to say...
No, use that one there.
Oh, I have to use this one?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Sit down.
I don't want to sit down.
The only trouble is that the audio won't work.
I don't know if you...
Won't work. You're going to make me sit down. I'm a Greek.
I don't like sitting down either, actually.
I think it's okay, just for a minute. I do want to stand up. First of all, thank you all for being here and for being at the conference. We know we're fellow travellers, and we've heard some wonderful things from all of you. You know, it's been really interesting to be here. These conferences are about making a difference. They're calls to action, and we can pick up points from all of you. But before we start with the presentation, I want to say there are three big barriers for all of us that in everything that we're trying to do hits up against the barrier. In higher education, the first barrier is the business model. The business model requires presence, it requires cleaners, gardens, accommodation, and so nobody in administration is able to shift that because that's how tight the business model is. So that's one problem we have about, you know, whether they go online or use digital tools or whatever. The second one is that the learning management systems, you know, the Moodles, the Canvases, were never designed for AI. Never. Upload, download, you know, a little bit of chat, whatever. They were never designed. But every one of those businesses has put millions of dollars into those systems, which make it very hard for a lot of the things that all you say or we say to do, even what we're going to show to you today. And thirdly, we've seen from many of you many commercial apps. Because AI, as I said right at the beginning, does not come from in the university, right? They steal our students, they take our teachers, but it's the commercial world and those 6, 7, 8 men who scrape the world, right? They control it. So we have to be aware of those limitations. They're systemic problems that we have to begin with. So what we're going to do today is something that's a little unique. We're going to talk, like the rest of you, about some of the kind of broader principles, but we want to show you an example of what we believe, despite all that, is possible to do, right? But it's not only those platforms. We've had to invent a pedagogical platform in order to realise our values, the human values, and all the other values we have in education. And you won't be able to find the sort of thing we're going to actually demonstrate is possible easily outside of the context in which we have. So Bill, if you can just put on the next slide. So we're going to do three things with you now. Just really, Bill says I have to be quick. because we're going to do a demonstration and it takes longer. So first of all, we've all said this is uninterrupted, and there's no silver bullet. Nobody has an answer. Every day it's changing, and yes, we have ideas, but we don't really know where it's going. It's not in control. We are not in control of it. The academy is not in control of it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is we will show you our model and then the implications for the future of learning. They're the three parts. But I want to go just to this one quickly. Bill hates this slide, but it's just to remind us, because everybody said we have no choice. In the whole of human history, we made meaning in multimodal ways, for the whole of it, right? Outside is Socrates. There's a plaque of Socrates. He only spoke. He never wrote books. He never, had music, digital. The whole time, oracy prevailed, and all sorts of forms of making meaning, clouds, bodies, it was synesthetic, right up until the printing press. Right? And once the printing press happened, right, we got formal schooling. And with formal schooling came opportunities and closures, control, gatekeepers, right? And the university, and this is one of the universities being here, has only been around for 1,000 years. Right? We think it's been here forever? No. It didn't exist before that, and it existed for narrow reasons to begin with, which you all know. And schooling, maths schooling, is even less. Traditional maths schooling, which we all love, is the golden standard, everybody has to go there. It's only had 150 years, right? And now we're in this disruptive moment. That's what the disruptive moment means. That multimodality, digital media, hybrid, ubiquitous learning is upon us, whether we like it or not. But remember those constraints that I said? They're systemic, right? And although the opportunities and the affordances of the digital allow us to do things, we are constrained by those systemic things that we value. The things that the family value, the things that they imagine are going to go on forever, but they're not going to go on forever. So I just wanted to remind us and give you a visual presentation of the fact that this is an imperative now, but we cannot do it on our own. We need to come together and talk like this, but we cannot, the university does not have the resources unless we collaborate with computer scientists, with historians, with philosophers, with English, to invent tools. We have to. Educators have to. Everyone's been talking about the new role of educators. One of them is to create new tools. So, Bill.
Okay. I think this next slide's me, yes?
You're the next one.
Right. And I'm going to behave myself and sit down. I also like walking around. I know we're tethered to a computer and all sorts of stuff. So here I am. So firstly, this AI universe is everywhere, and in our daily lives now. And the key characteristics of this, and this is important for us as educators, is these are learning systems, right? These are systems which learn by their interactions with you. They're systems which collect data about you and which then tune their relations to you around how they learn about you. So this sort of stuff's around you, and one of the things that's really important for us as educators is we're interested in this question of learning, and these are learning machines, and the people who build the machines often don't kind of conceive them in those ways. And what I want to do is I want to talk about the ways in which this learning happens, how it's different from human learning, but how it's perhaps complementary with human learning as well. But look, we know immediately it's produced a problem for education, because for the first time we have a machine which can do representational work which is equivalent to cognitive work. That's a kind of a hedge around the fact that it's not cognitive work, but it's representational work which is a proxy for what humans would have done as cognitive work. And of course, it's the most immediate problem for schools and students is, has the assignment been written by the student or the AI? To what extent has the AI been an integral part of that process? And there's an English professor who deals with e-learning has for a long time, I don't know, Mike Sharples. And what he says is this is democratising cheating. So what he means by that is that until generative AI, you had to pay $100 for someone to write the essay for you. Someone would write the essay for you in India or somewhere or other, you'd pay them $100. And his estimate, or somebody's estimate, was up to 15% of US assignments had been written in what we call paper mills. There are all sorts of AI detectors now, and the good news is, and because I'm interested in this, I get it in my Facebook feed all the time, I took some snapshots, is there's, for every AI detector, there's another piece of software you can download which hides the fact that it's AI. And it's very easy to hide the fact that it's AI as well. The key marker of AI is that it's word perfect. I can't write stuff that's word perfect without typos. So, you know, throw a few typos in and the AI detectors have no way of telling. This kind of produces a bigger problem. Cheating is kind of a superficial problem, but we'll talk about the bigger problem a little bit down the track. But the good news is, in the next slide, I have the definitive solution, and we could go away after the next slide, because here's the definitive solution. Right. And this is in fact what we're doing. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, we'll have highly proctored exams. We'll ask people to hand scribe. Are they hand scribe? They're hand scribing, that's right. We can't use no phones, no computers, because the minute you've got those, you can connect to the world. Now, the kind of serious question behind this is, what's the implicit theory of learning that's behind this? The implicit theory of learning is long-term memory, which is just whatever you can retain in your mind until the day of the exam. And long-term, by the way, the definition of the period of time for long-term is until the day after the exam. Right? So that's the definition of learning. Now, these days, I've got these damn things, and I've forgotten. I used to remember everybody's phone number, and I don't even know my son's phone number now, because, you know, it's here, it's in the machine. We have these things which we would call cognitive prostheses. And this was a problematic theory of learning always, because of course it's social, you look up books, you talk to your friends, you work collaboratively. Knowledge was always social, but in a way it's become much more social when we rely on these other devices as substitutes for memory. Memory becomes less and less relevant. Now, of course, memory happens still in these environments incidentally to the practice. I can remember where to find something in a menu. There are different forms of memory that are there. So, well, this is not a solution then. So what I want to do is track back now and try to characterise our understanding of AI. So one of the things, because we're really interested in this, AI really only happens in one place. Now, if you want to know everything that's happened in AI, the day it happens, you follow Archive, ARXIV, which is the Cornell repository. And everything significant in AI gets published there. And you can, there's so much published, it's unmanageable, but there are all sorts of synthesis sites which are on social media which are telling you what's happening in AI, Archive. What you're about to get, and by the way, DeepSeek, the Chinese, publish in Archive. That's really interesting. OpenAI publish there. Anything that gets published. DeepSeek tell you everything. OpenAI don't tell you everything. But nevertheless, their key articles will get published there. So, but one of the things is we're going to give you a view now, which is different from theirs, in that it's actually thinking about what it means in terms of text and in terms of semantics. So here we are 20 years later after this conference where we were doing with multi-literacies. We're still interested from the point of view of human meaning in general terms and the issue of textuality, right? Now, this is big. I mean, Mary said in her introductory slide, which I'm always sceptical of, by the way, because this is kind of, okay, we do the history of the world in one slide. Okay, we did it, right? But that's okay. It's an important point. So in the middle point there, this university is founded in 1531. That's a really important point because that's 81 years after Gutenberg, by which time the printing press as a form of life had established and formal education falls out of it. So this is a a really important moment. Not to be too Western-centric. In fact, movable type gets invented in China with Pishing, 1039. It doesn't become generalised. Gutenberg has the same invention. Did he get the idea from China? Well, maybe not. But nevertheless, it becomes profoundly important in terms of the affordance of technology to change the world. Right?
Reproduction, Bill.
Mary's just reminded me of the most important point on this slide, so there you go, which is the reproduction. So what it is, it's the mechanical reproduction of text, which is a really important moment. Now, this is perhaps an equally important moment because, in fact, what we have with generative AI is the mechanical production of text, right? And this is an image which was generated sacrilegiously by me on DALL-E. It was DALL-E, it's now OpenAI. I'm not calling it that anymore. So what's really interesting is that both humans and generative AI can make coherent meaning from the endless combinatorial possibilities of language. So we've got a pile of words, we've got syntactical structures whereby we put those words together, that's what we do as human beings, and now we've got a machine that can do that as well. That's pretty damn spectacular.
It's never the same. Always different because it's the production.
Right, so it's never the same. So one of the important points that Mary's pointing out now is that the last 300 words I said have never been said in that combination before. You've got a 3-year-old chattering away, the last 300 words they said have never been. So what we do is we kind of continually recombine the world in meaningful ways. Here's a machine that does this as well, and every text is unique. That's the cheating problem, right? There's no such thing as plagiarism, as the machine will create new text. But our most important point here is they have fundamentally different mechanisms for taming the infinite possibilities of vocabulary plus syntax, if you like. That's really interesting. So what I want to do now in just a couple of slides is the nearly impossible, which is to give our languaged version of how it works. This is how it works. People might know that in our more recent work, Mary and I have been using this idea of transposition, right, which is the idea of moving meanings from one place to another, one form of meaning to another, text to image, that's the multi-modality argument. But in fact, what happens with generative AI is also a textual transposition. So I put in a prompt, the machine does a pile of stuff, and out comes the answer. And one of the really foundational points here is that nothing happens without going through binary notation. So these are just binary notation machines, zeros and ones. You know, we know when this idea was thought up. Claude Shannon realised that George Boole had not a bad idea in terms of stuff that could be operationalised in terms of noughts and zeros and ones. And there's a whole fascinating history of how recently this gets thought through in the computational universe. The idea that you can build these electronic machines where there are two fundamental operators, an on switch and an off switch. That's 0 and 1, just zeros and ones. And what we can do with binary notation is we can name things in the world, right, which is, and I'll explain how that naming happens in a couple of slides. We can do base 2 calculations, we can add those things up, and we can do Boolean logic, which is if-then. Very simple logic, which is following George Boole. But everything has to go through zeros and ones. Now, the question then is, how do we deal with those zeros and ones in AI? And this is kind of a very schematic history of AI. So, firstly, and I'm going to give educational examples here very, very quickly. Firstly was this world of symbolic and rule-based AI. That really begins with computer programming, begins with Turing, to be quite frank. In education, we're at the University of Illinois. Plato was something which was begun in 1959, the world's first computer-mediated learning system, and it used symbolic and rule-based AI to do things which were different from regular human-to-human teaching relationships, and in many respects more powerful, right from the very start. And Mary and I have written an article about the history of this, which is referenced there if people are interested. Data-driven AI really begins 80s, 90s. There's this AI winter where eventually these systems are brittle, too complex, they can't deal with too much variability. There are a whole set of reasons why these reach their limits in the first generation. And data-driven AI is actually a very, very different paradigm, which involves supervised and unsupervised machine learning. So what's interesting is each of these systems have different ways of learning. We've just written a long piece about this. So, they are learning from their environment, and it's a dialectical relation with human beings, but the way in which it happens. So with data-driven AI, the best example is automated writing evaluation. What happens is you get expert evaluators to assess 500 essays. This is an A, this is a B, this is a C and a D, and just by using natural language processing, when the next one gets fed into the machine, it will give it an A or a B or a C or a D. That's based on big data, and so that's an educational example of supervised machine learning. Now, what's interesting is what this generation, which we call text semantic AI, and I'm going to try to explain our version of how it works in the next couple of slides, is actually 200 lines of code invented by 8 people down the bottom at Google Brain published in 2017. Right? It's a very, very... the basic architecture of it is just simply the statistical relationships of words to each other. So what we have is we have almost every published word in these things, let's say 5 billion words, and what we do is we work out the relationship between those words to each other, and we redefine the meaning of every word as many, many meanings for each word based on the relationships between those words around them. And this is this transformational process. We've worked in Paradigm 2 for a number of years, and nobody saw Paradigm 3 coming. Nobody saw it coming, right? And it is just 200 lines of code that these people created. And what it does, it leverages the semantics of language on the basis of this massive, massive database along the way. So how does it do that? Well, firstly, this is our kind of digital literacy thing here, if you like. Firstly, everything in the world operates now in a scripting system called Unicode. You may or may not be aware of it, but I'll send you a message. I'm on an iPhone, you're on an Android. It gets there because there's a common understanding about the character set. The character set's 150,000 characters roughly. It includes emojis, it includes everything in every human language, including linear A and linear B, even nobody knows what they... the language has been lost now. And there, in terms of binary notation, there is the encoding for the letter A, uppercase A, there, right? So everything can be... this character set names the world in those terms. Now, what it does is... it's a system of graphemes, right? And there are two kind of fundamentally different types of graphemes that occur. There are ideographs, like number 8 is an idea, plus sign's an idea, Chinese character is an idea, phonemes represent sounds. But it doesn't operate at the level of phonemes. What it needs to do, it needs to put those phonemes together into tokens. So if I've got the word walked down the street, that's actually 2 tokens, walk, and then ED indicates the past tense. So there's a few more tokens in the world than there are words. So this is kind of this text semantic space, and it actually builds a generative view of the latent structures of meaning in the world with then billions or trillions of vectors. Right, so that's roughly what it is. And what's kind of interesting about it is text, and our definition of text is that which can be written in Unicode. This only operates in text, and of course math and code are also writing. So, there's not a distinction between any of these things. That's why it's so good at doing software coding, by the way, because it's treating software code as language. Right, a quick concluding slide, which is kind of dense. We often have a longer version of this where we try and give more explanations, but you'll get a sense of it, and we've published quite a bit on this, is that we're dealing with the infinities of language and meaning, the infinities of textuality, and the mechanisms of the two are fundamentally different. So what we do with humans is if you go back to Chomsky, for example, and by the way, Chomsky partly becomes relevant and has always been wrong about a whole lot of things, we have nouns and we have verbs, right? So nouns are kind of things, verbs are actions. We tell kids this in school. We can substitute out huge vocabularies and build these complex architectures because our minds operate grammatically. Now, we have a different account of how our minds come to work grammatically. Chomsky's is a reductionist kind of biological version. So we sort out the complexity of the world around a kind of a theory of the world which is embodied in grammar. What generative AI does, it simply has a set of the empirical relationships of the 5 billion words to each other. That's all it has. It has no conceptual architecture, so it's massively an empirical thing, way beyond what any human being could do, and therefore much more powerful with language than any of us mortal human beings. But its mechanisms are entirely different mechanisms. So it's important to know that, because what we're then doing... Oh, by the way, I'm going to jump... this is our next part, but I'm going to tell you the spoiler at the end, which is part 3. The spoiler is artificial intelligence is just a terrible idea. But we're going to get to that, which is, the terrible idea is to think that it's an artificial version of human intelligence. No, it's so fundamentally different. The way in which this processes language is phenomenal, spectacular, way beyond any human capacity, right? But on the other hand, it's totally different from the way in which humans operate with language, and in some respects totally inadequate. So we've got to work out what the differences are rather than think it's an artificial version of the same thing. Sorry, that's the spoiler, but we're going to get to that near the end. So we're now on to part 2, where we're going to talk about what it is we're doing. Do you want to introduce this?
All right, I'll get up again. Sorry. As Bill said, we've been working for many years around the digital and creating digital pedagogical platforms. And we're going to share with you what we call a common ground scholar. It actually comes out of the work and thinking of this conference. And we have created this platform in order to harness the affordance of the digital in powerful ways for teaching and learning. So we have a range of, Bill says I have to do this very quickly because we decided to share our, we have a space for engagement, right, in this pedagogical framework. We have built into it reflective collaboration, right, which is absolutely core. It's multi-modal, because all reading now is multi-modal. Like you send pictures rather than text or writing a letter. Multi-modality is now the norm for meaning making. So the platform allows you to write, produce, create in a multi-modal way. It's now we've added AI, and you'll see how that's the new innovation that we've put in now. It also has analytics, and I'm going to show you that. You've got that analytics slide still in there, Bill?
Yep.
I'll get to it. As you go assessment, not assessment at the end, right? That tells you you pass or it's A, B, and C. You need assessment as you go along, and we have an analytical tool that does that, and we'll show it to you. It provides a portfolio for the student of all the work they've done, because you can trace it and keep it, and a portfolio for the teacher in the kind of instructional tools that they create. And it's about the design for learning and the delivery. And as I said, now, more recently, we have, and I think Nancy did a presentation earlier on it, where we inserted generative AI in a very specific kind of way within this pedagogical platform.
Okay, you don't want to do those other slides now. I'll go and do the demo now.
What's the next one?
All right, so the next one is I was going to do the walkthrough, but those other slides with the analytics, you'll do them later.
Oh no, give me the analytics now.
So there's actually a couple of slides before that which you can talk to. You want me to talk to this? So this is foreshadowing what you're about to see, which we could have summarised afterwards if Mary hadn't wanted to jump the gun.
So Bill, go ahead.
No. We'll do this now. So what you're about to see, is there are 2 steps in what you're about to see. One is a helper, and look, technically I'll try and explain what's going on along the way. The first one uses contextual AI, so we know how you're using the AI. The second one is big picture thinking afterwards. Do you want to talk about this one?
Oh yes, okay.
See, she's dying to talk about it. This could have been the summary after the demo, you see, but nevertheless you're going to...
Right, we call it cyber scholar, and Bill will explain it to you when you get into why, and why we don't use artificial intelligence. It's not helpful. We need new language for the partnership between the machine and the human, and this is what this represents, the cyber session. So we have a process in this model that we're going to show you. It's a very specific, it's higher education, it's a work...
Oh, and kids at school.
Yes, it's also kids at school.
Right.
But we're going to show you a higher ed example.
Yes, what we're doing.
Because in higher education, you present by writing and producing So we have a project, or we start with some kind of project. There's a draft. Now, and we've tried it both ways, it goes to AI review first in a complex way, which Bill will explain.
It doesn't have to be first, by the way. The peer review could be first.
We have done it both ways. We have different results, and on Nancy and others have written out those results. But in the end of those results, because we've improved the kinds of tools that we've put into the Cyber Scholar, we now are confident enough to put the AI reviews directly after the draft. And you'll see why when Bill gives you a live show. After that,
actually, even interestingly, now. Both together, actually, yeah. So.
All right. After that, it goes to peer review. Now, you would have heard Nancy say, you can't work in this space without humans. The human moderation has to always be built into the process. So even though we have the AI and you'll see how it works, it then goes to peer review. There's a revise and resubmit, and then you have to write what you changed and why you wrote self-reflection, metacognition. We build all those kind of values into this process, and then it goes into published into a portfolio, and it becomes part of the collective knowledge of the class which is shared. So and this is really important. All of you know that assessment is a tail that wags the dog of curriculum and instruction. So depending on what assessment you choose to do or what you're forced to do, it will influence the kind of pedagogy that you have. So our analytical tool is this one. We've created it. It's called an astropod, like a flower with petals. And you can divide it in any way you want. We have divided it in 3 ways, which demonstrates our pedagogy, what really matters to us. So knowledge matters, right? So you see the petals move around knowledge, and the student knows exactly, there's no secrets, what they have to do for those petals to move. The second one, because it's online and digital, we actually track their level of engagement. You know, what are they actually doing, how long and what for? And it tracks and they get greater on that. But the most important one, given that everyone's worried about cheating, is what we call help. Because we think knowledge today needs to be collaborative, needs to be social, right? Cheating is not an issue, right? How much do you help each other in order to get better results? What's your quality of the feedback that you get? How do you give feedback? So those 3 domains reflect our pedagogy: collaborative, engaged, and based on feedback, which is called human feedback and AI feedback.
Okay, so that's the conclusion. Now I'm going to show you the bit before the conclusion. Actually, it's not about eating a big picture like that first. So what I'm going to do is, this is this new version of Scholar. So the Scholar story is, we started building this platform in 2000 actually, and this is the 3rd major time we built this thing. But we really, when AI came along, we just had to kind of start again. So this is this platform, and let me just see if I'm logged in. So I've gone in here now to, I'll size this down, into a landing, onto a landing page. So let me just say that on the dashboard, if I were a student, I'd just see this, which is my works, projects that I'm doing, and my projects. What a project is, it's a sequence of things that the teachers asked you to do, you know, draft the thing, peer review, use AI review, whatever. So that's what a project is, and with deadlines and all that kind of good stuff. Teachers will see this, which is admin projects, that's how they construct the project, and they set up peer reviews and set up, they do a whole lot of settings. We have these things called rubric agents. You might have heard about agents in this AI space. We've reframed the legacy notion of a rubric into a series of agents, right, which are kind of personified actually in ways which I'm going to show you. So and super admin, by the way, that's 5 people's accounts who can see into everybody's accounts and fix bugs, and that would only be something that we see as managers. You're seeing my version of things. So I'm going to go into one example of a work, and I'm going to go into an existing work, and I want to go into a work that one of our students wrote. So this is a master's doctoral program. So this particular, and I want to show you what it is, give you an example of what one of these things is. So this person is writing about station rotation, generative AI, and tailored learning in the middle school. Okay, so they've got a nice introduction here. This is kind of looks like an essay in a way. It's multi-modal, as Mary said. They've put videos all the way through it. Can you? This is a. Maybe I'll size it. No, I run a risk of sizing it up. I'll try and size it up a little bit for you without it going strange. Can you read that now? Yep. So I just want to give you a rough sense of things. What is generative AI? Differentiated adaptive learning, utilising station rotation, constructivism, active learning, differentiated instruction, applications, challenges. So I just want to give you a rough sense of this kind of work. Gemini by Google. Here's a video about Google's Gemini. Here's somebody at Khan talking about Khan Academy. Here's critics and limitations, teaching AI or teaching through AI, over-reliance on technology, equity access. So this is what we would expect our students to be writing on. So it's a complex, we call this complex epistemic performance. It's a complex knowledge representation. If I was to put a test in here, the answer to question 2 would be B. And it could easily have been C if you fell for the distractor writing. So we've kind of got an argument that any of those conventional, we've just written a piece about this, any of those conventional forms of psychometrics can only deal with surface knowledge. But here we've got a complex knowledge representation, and at last we've got an environment where we can be interacting with this at the level at which it's operating. I'm going to show you how that works. So the slide before that we showed you, there are two kind of phases in this. A phase that we call cyber helper, which is while you're writing, and a phase that we call cyber review, which is when you've got all your ideas together. The cyber helper helps you in detail with the work that you're doing, whereas the review is big picture thinking about your work. So I'm going to pull this over so we can see more of what's going on. And what I'm going to do over here is firstly, I'm going to pull up, by the way, other things here, we've got, just let me say this to you, we've got all sorts of, I've got to go back to the current version, sorry. Let me go up here to the, we've got these. Okay, so let me go to working version. Here we go. Now the editor's in place. So I was showing you an older version of this. This is an editor. And here we've got Cyber Helper, which I'm going to show you. We can insert media, multi-modal, any media, any digital media, videos, anything you want to put in there. We've got a citation manager, which deals with references. So this is what kind of Google Docs and Word do, except this is Google Docs and Word powered by AI. Now here we've got Cyber Helper, where what I'm going to do is we've built a series of tools which will help you do work where we've built behind this what's called meta prompts. Right? So when we say brainstorm or research or plan or expand or summarise, that's if you want to make things shorter or longer, translate into any language, what's the logic, give us advice, proofread, these are all sorts of things you can do. But what we've done is we've said, do not give the students the answer, give them things that they need to do for themselves. Now this is actually the opposite of what AI does. AI says helpfully, what's the cause of the French Revolution? Well, would you like me to write an essay for you about this? Well, that's entirely unhelpful in educational context. So rebuilding these meta prompts has been pretty important. I'm going to show you brainstorming as an example. So what I do here is I choose the selection. But before I do that, I'm going to show you something about the configuration of what's going on here. Now, normally what a teacher would do is they'd configure it for the students. Sometimes, the teacher might want to allow the students to configure, but you'll see it's kind of interesting how you configure the AI. But what I'm going to do is, before I run the brainstorm, I'm going to show you the configuration. Firstly, we are not tethered to any foundation model. Every foundation model that's there, and there's only 6 or 7 of them, is here. This is OpenAI GPT-4.0 latest, which is the one we're going to use. Llama is Meta, a la Facebook. Another couple more OpenAIs. DeepSeek, which is pretty spectacular, is the Chinese one. Grok is Elon Musk, if that's your taste. Quen is, actually Grok is pretty good to be quite frank, and interestingly different from the other ones. Quen is Alibaba, so there are 2 Chinese models. There's not many of these damn things. There's Anthropic, of course, we know is there, mentioned this morning. Google Gemini, which is pretty darn good. Mistral is the only non-Chinese, non-American one. It's a French one. You can use that if you're in Europe and you're not keen on the Americans or the Chinese. More grok models, blah, 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 more on. We've got all the models, any model you want to choose, and they're interestingly different. That's why the configuration is important. But the most important thing is we're not tethered to any one LLM. The next
students get to choose and test them out.
Right. So, by the way, since 48 hours ago, the teacher can actually set it for, and then the student can't choose.
Oh,
right. But this is, the teacher might allow the student to choose, and if they could, this is what they can choose, or this tells you what the teacher can choose. So what we have here is a knowledge base. Now, we can build these knowledge bases, the teacher can build these knowledge bases. This is, we've got a history of democracy thing we're doing with kids. We've got Merck manuals, which is a 1 million word medical manual created by a pharmaceutical company, which we're testing out with medical education. But the one we're using here is this CG Scholar class repo, give it a funny obscure name. Now what that is that's everything that all our graduate students have written for the last 5 years, and everything Mary and I have written. And
it's a bounded corpus.
It's a corpus that we've created. So this is actually us putting it into, what this process does, it vectorizes it, builds it out into the LLM, or as a supplement to the LLM. And I'm talking technically to folks just, for folks who are interested, but you can get the general idea. So this is 35 million tokens, which is about 32 million words. It's doesn't matter how big it is, the bigger it is, the better in a whole lot of ways. And this then informs the responses. So these are finely tuned responses, and you'll see how good they are because our students have done some amazing work around educational technology, innovative pedagogy, and we're using that collective intelligence to inform the feedback.
Just a minute, Bill, and that's something all of us have been saying, that the teacher's role has to change. And this is an example of one of the things that the teacher needs to do. Before they'd have the textbook, they'd have the library, they'd have whatever, but now they select items that they put in the corpus, which the students, when they're doing their project, can go to that corpus. It could be a music project or a mathematics project or a medicine or whatever. It is possible to create these corpuses. It's not hard to do, and your students, when they go out into the AI, they don't go into the wild. Right. They go into the corpus that the educator, the teacher has created.
So that's what we build in this environment. Upload anything you want as much as you like, put links to things, whatever, and it builds this thing called a knowledge base, which is vectorized in the same way that an LLM is, and that then becomes the intelligence that informs the response. Next thing is this idea of rubric agents. So here, this is a library of rubric agents. I can see somebody's done something about medical therapy today. There's something about poetry that one of the teachers did. We're going to use this one called Ways of Knowing, which is the one we've built for our course, right? But a teacher can build a set of rubric agents. So I'm going to select that one. It's already selected. Now, let me go back and that's the configuration. That's what's running the machine in the background. I'm going to go down here, and let me just find something, what is station rotation, da, 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 da. I could select the whole work. Well, look, actually what I'll do is I'll just choose station rotation here. So I want to brainstorm station rotation. I don't, need to at this stage because the student's done this much work, and what I'm going to do is it's already been selected because I showed it to somebody a minute ago. So there's the selection, but it could be a paragraph that I want to brainstorm, it could be the whole work, it could be just a word, doesn't matter. I'm brainstorming something that I've done on the left, and I'm going to run that. I can also here type a message where I qualified the generic prompt, but here it is, so I'm going to start running it now. So what's interesting, and this is how it's interpreted my command. What's interesting is we're kind of blown away by the amount of computation that's going on behind this. This is taking, the text on the left, it's comparing it with our 32 million word database, and what it's then giving is incredibly, absolutely Dr. Cope, what happens is these systems know you on your profile, and they get to know all the work you've done. So of course, from a privacy point of view, I have a funny thing about transparency and surveillance. These are also systems where it gets to know you. The relationship between you and the machine is very transparent, but they're also surveillance systems. So getting to know you and what you know is actually pretty important in an educational context. So it does get to know you over time. Essential ideas: clear definition of origin, structure on pedagogical rationale, integration with AI, clarify. So this is giving you a whole lot of suggestions about how you might deal with station rotation from this resource base, which has merit, and look, with some critiques, e.g. Benjamin 2019 argue that, very specific stuff, because that's coming from our knowledge base. Now, when the knowledge base can't answer it, it goes back into the foundation LLM. But the most important thing is tuning for that. So then what I'm going to say down the bottom is, I'm going to find something in here. Multi-literacies. What the hell does multi-literacies mean? So what I can do as a student, and I can say down here, please explain. So I can talk to this. And again, it'll do it now. So there we go. Because I've never heard of multi-literacy before, and as a student, the AI has given me feedback, but I can talk to it. Now again, what Mary, and by the way, this is all happening live, obviously. What we keep saying is this is not talking to an artificial intelligence. This is talking to the collective intelligence and the evaluative framework constructed by the teacher in the knowledge base and the rubric agents. Right, so that's what it's doing. And there we go, there's the explanation. Of course, Dr. Cope, below, patronising, isn't it? Below is a brainstorm that unpacks the concept of multi-literacies, essential ideas, definition, created by the New London Group 1996, multi-literacies, the four knowledge processes, That's a pretty damn good summary about multi-literacy and equity, personalised learning. Well, honestly, I've never really thought about how multi-literacy supported personalised learning, but this has given a good response here. Okay, so what I've done is I've used these tools, but the most important thing, and I haven't got to the review phase yet, I've just showed you the helper phase while I'm writing. The most important thing is that what we're doing behind here with contextual AI is we're collecting keystrokes, we're collecting timestamps, we're collecting click streams, and we're building a composite picture of how you've used the AI, how much you've used it, and the different ways in which we've used it, which have been framed by us. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I've finished my work, and now I'm in the review phase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a new review, and what it does, and by the way, I can see the differences between different versions and see how the AI has influenced my thinking. I could do a self-review, which is a human review, or it could be, if it's someone else's work, I'm doing a peer review. As Mary said, we want humans in the loop, and we want humans moderating this all the time. I'm going to do a cyber review, and I'm going to leave the configuration the way it was. Okay, I could change the configuration, or it might be the configuration started by prescribed by the teacher. Okay, create a version and start a new review. We force an increment at this stage because we want to know the ways in which the AI has influenced your thinking. Now again, we have 10 rubric agents which are based on the learning by design theory, and each of these things are in fact personifications of perspectives. There are people who, with a experiential interest thing, an evidentiary thing, a conceptual thing, a theoretical thing, looking at the work that's going on. And again, what's kind of which we're kind of surprised by. Again, the amount of yes, we're worried about the amount of electricity it uses. Okay, that's a separate problem, which we'll come to later. I'm worried about flying in a plane and driving a car and eating baked beans as well. So I don't know what we can do about that, because everything we do is worrying. So
I was just going to say the rubric again is something else that the teacher has to do.
Right. The teacher has to build this.
It's a scaffold for the exercise.
And I can show you. Look, building a rubric agent is a series of forms. So building the knowledge base is a place where you upload stuff. So this is not. You don't need a computer science degree to run the thing. But again, what's kind of surprising about this is we've got a 5,000 word text there on the left. We've got a 32 million word knowledge base. We've got these elaborate rubric agents, and it's actually going over this work 10 times, right? So the amount of computation going on here in terms of the zeros and ones, the binary notation at the bottom of all computing is just simply, it's kind of mind-blowing in a way. So, and look, this is kind of quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the feedback that's here. It's nearly at the end. I'll pull this across so we can spend more time looking at this side here. Okay, done already.
You can put anything in criteria.
As I say, this is, you can build this on anything. I mean, examples is where a medical one we're doing with patient notes, what are medical criteria. You can do anything. Grade 4 kids doing an animals project. You can build a rubric about how one represents animals effectively. But look, it's done assessment, it's given us star ratings because there are 4 levels. This is actually 5 levels because no stars is another level. So we built this into our rubric. That's what we want to do. It's given to those star ratings. And what it's patronised me again. Dr. Cope, thank you for description of prior experience. The author provides a clear connection with prior experience. This is just the first criteria. However, some areas could benefit with some more self-examination. For example, the author mentions being proactive and open to change. They could deepen their exploration of their positionality by reflecting more explicitly on their pedagogical beliefs and assumptions about technology. Unbelievable. Huh?
From the corpus.
Yeah, no, but also what it'll do is, I'm going to go overall the author does rating 3, but also suggestions for improvement is really important. We tell the machine not to give answers, to force you to keep on going. Provide them more nuanced their pedagogical stance towards AI. Consider how their socio-cultural context might shape their understanding. Rating 3. And I can go down through each, but by the way, one of the tricks is, with these rubric agents here, we've built a long-form description of what we mean by prior experience.
So that's the fine-tuning that we do.
Right.
In order...
And so it's, a normal rubric is just a historical rubric is just a page with levels and criteria where there's a lot of stuff densely packed in, a lot of assumptions. If you spell it out in detail like this, you get a much better response. This is only the first of 10. Here we are about evidence, explanation, strengths and empirical sources, and these references are all really, really good, accurate references. There's Tomlinson, there's whatever.
Doesn't hallucinate.
Yeah, it doesn't. At this level, it doesn't hallucinate because we've given it this dedicated knowledge base that it's working on. Areas, depth of empirical validation. Look, really, source attribution, while the paper includes comprehensive in-text could be more explicit in some sections. Very specific stuff. Conclusion. Dr. Cope, your text demonstrates. Well, look, honestly, this is, by the way, it thinks this text is mine because I copied and pasted it in here. That's mine. That's why it thinks it's mine. And so on, all the way through. Now look, what an amazing, this is the feedback.
It's far too much.
It's far too much. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say over here, let me just copy and paste something so I don't send you all crazy. I'm going to go over here and forget about that one, this one here. I'm going to copy and paste this so you don't see how bad I am as a typist. And I'm going to go and use...
No educator could give that level of...
Please summarise in 30 words, which is, it'll do a 30-word summary of that pile of words. The paper demonstrates that strong potential for there, and I can go back and look at it in a bit more carefully. In terms of multilingualism, I like this example. Mary thinks this is too obscure and is always critical of me using this example, but I am going to say we've been doing we were in India earlier in the year and we've got a project with some small languages in India. This is not a small language, Odia. People might know Odia, you might know Odia. It's probably 10 million speakers, but its textual corpus wouldn't be large, because of...
But you can put any language.
You can put any language in here. But what's really interesting about this is that there it is in Odia, which is, what a beautiful script, huh? By the way, he's become 10 employees, but he uses all the AI coding stuff. Anyhow, let's keep on going. And we also have a team in Poland. Okay, so let's go on and try and conclude this quickly. Firstly, this is the Manchester one, Turing's Manchester one. And they're talking about artificial and general intelligence, artificial simple intelligence. Sorry, this damn machine was smarter than humans back then because it was able to find prime numbers that would be a waste of time and impossible for humans to find. So already these machines have been much smarter than humans.
A little smarter is that good. More capability.
General intelligence. let's use the word intelligent, which is more intelligent than humans. I'm going to use their word. In some respect, but likewise, any machine that knows the relationship between every word in the whole corpus of human existence is pretty darn powerful, and much more powerful than humans in the use of language, but in ways which are very, very different. So how do we build this complementarity? Now, this man's the culprit who invented this phrase, artificial intelligence, John McCarthy, in 1955-56. Actually, a really important person in the history of computing, but just the very idea that this is a replication of human intelligence, it's not. We like this idea, which is the cybernetic idea, which is about kind of feedback systems. And for Mary, who's a Greek, who we need to keep, we need to kind of honour her Greek background. The cybernetes is the person with the oar at the back. So it's about feedback systems, to go in a straight line, you push the oar this way, you push the oar that way. And in terms of machine learning, this is an obscure idea which I quite like, so you'll have to bear with me for 1 second. This was probably the first machine that was able to act autonomously on the basis of a program. So this is Bolt and Watt, double-acting steam engine, 1784, and this thing marvellously called the governor. If there wasn't enough steam, this was spinning. You see, it would come in and let more steam in, and then as too much steam, it goes the other way. By the way, it was programmed as more and less. This was the first programmable machine. In other words, a machine which was delegated some degree of autonomy within a framework created by humans. So this becomes our definition of what's artificial about this, which is any meaning that can be delegated to a machine to undertake semi-autonomously, always delegated. And for this, the machine must be taught how to learn. I want to come back to our original point about learning. The machine learnt about not enough steam, more steam, and we taught it a system of learning. So this is how these are learning machines. So then what we want to do, and this is the last substantive slide, is we want to say this is collective and not artificial intelligence. So what we have is, we have these machines which are able to learn themselves, starting with the Bolt and Watt engine. So they're able to kind of learn certain things. And by the way, the distinction is, when I use a word processor, it's not a learning machine. It's a kind of, I just press the key and an A comes up. These are machines, these are machines which in certain moments are able to learn from their environment and learn from their users, and therefore interact in these ways. So this is our kind of model. And what's collective about the LLM environment is, firstly, the LLM corpus is every published human word, so it's the massive piece of human collective intelligence, not just a machine. That this is fine-tuned by the people in the AI factories. Interestingly, well, it's a long story. There's the man who was just stolen by Meta owns a company called not Space AI. Space AI. What's it called? It's not Space AI. I'll think of it in a second. It's a word beginning with S. It doesn't matter. They do all the fine-tuning, which means if I want to say, tell me a quick way to suicide, they're going to say, sorry, we can't answer that question. Now, in fact, the LLM has that answer in it. So fine-tuning means actually aligning it with human values. The meta prompts then is it tells you how to speak, and the unhelpful thing about these LLMs is it's going to be helpful, and it's going to say what's the causes of the French Revolution. It'll give you some dot points, and then it says, would you like me to write this for you as an essay? Right, which of course it'll do. So the meta prompts actually are counterproductive for education. But the second thing is it learns from the user prompts. So it learns about you, the new models. Our work does that, but the new models do that a lot. So you ask it to do an essay once, and the next time you come in, it'll ask you that same thing again. And the second thing, the last thing, which is really interesting, is these chains of thought and reasoning. So often you'll see this, which is you put in a prompt and then it says, well, what about this and what about this and what about this? So what it's doing is it's saying your prompt, I could give you if you did a better prompt. And then there's a chain of reasoning that happens in the whole thing, which is visible in DeepSeek, it's visible in Grok, and OpenAI hide it. And what we're doing now with our work is building in chains of thought, which are kind of pedagogical chains of thought. That's the next phase in what we're doing. Hey, that's everything. Sorry, folks, that was a lot of stuff. We're building this network, and the participants are going to be here tomorrow for a panel series. And if you want to get more papers about what we're doing, there's the QR code. Okay, we've got an hour for questions now.